Xavier Madelyn balanced a tray of champagne flutes in one hand while adjusting the collar of his too-tight catering uniform with the other, silently praying his 8-year-old son, Zayden, was behaving himself with the babysitter back home. He couldn't afford to lose this job, not when rent was late, and Zayden's school trip was next week. The ballroom at the Whitestone Foundation fundraiser gleamed with chandeliers and people who'd never worried about choosing between dinner or electricity. As he weaved through tuxedos and gowns, Xavier kept his head down like always. He didn't expect to catch her when she tripped. A woman stumbled backward from the edge of the marble staircase, and without thinking, Xavier dropped the tray and rushed forward. His arms caught her just before she hit the ground, the crash of glass echoing through the room. "Are you okay?" he asked breathlessly, holding her steady. Her eyes met his bright hazel with flecks of gold, wide with shock. "Yeah. I think so." He helped her upright, then brushed a few shards of glass away from her heels. "I'm so sorry," she said, brushing her long dark hair back. "I wasn't looking." "No harm done," Xavier said, glancing at the mess, "except maybe my paycheck." She laughed softly, a little breathless. "I'll cover the cost." "You don't have to, I want to." She looked at his name tag. "Xavier, thank you." He gave a small nod, then turned to clean the mess before his boss saw it, but she lingered, watching him work. Madelyn Jameson didn't usually attend these types of events unless she had to. But this one was for her late father's foundation, and her board expected her to show face. Being a CEO at 32 meant people constantly questioned if you earned your seat at the table or inherited it. She definitely earned it. But tonight, in heels that pinched and a dress she didn't pick, she felt out of place. Until she met him, she didn't know who he was, but the way he caught her, it wasn't just reflex. It was instinct, protective, grounded. "Miss Jameson," someone called from behind her, her assistant. The moment broke. Madelyn gave Xavier one last look. "I meant it. I owe you." He looked up at her, a little skeptical, a little amused. "I'll hold you to that." She smiled, then disappeared into the crowd. Xavier didn't think he'd see her again, but Madelyn couldn't stop thinking about him. The next morning, she called the catering company. "The man who worked the Whitestone event last night, Xavier. Can you tell me how to get in touch with him?" "We don't give out employee information," the woman on the phone replied. Madelyn hesitated. "Okay, then. Can you give him mine?" Xavier was wiping down a counter at the restaurant kitchen when his manager handed him a folded slip of paper. "Some woman called for you, said you helped her at the fundraiser." He opened the note. "Madelyn, the woman you caught, lunch and address, a time." Xavier stared at it. Was this a joke? He didn't usually get asked to lunch by women who wore diamond bracelets and smelled like expensive perfume. But 3 days later, curiosity and a little bit of something else made him show up. She was already there, sitting at her rooftop bistro table overlooking the city. When she saw him, her face lit up. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either," he admitted, sliding into the chair across from her. "Can I buy you lunch?" He eyed the menu. "Probably can't afford anything here anyway," she laughed. "Then I definitely have to." He relaxed a little. "You always invite the help out for lunch, only the ones who save my life," she teased. There was something about her, confident but not arrogant, rich but not cold. She asked about Zayden, and Xavier found himself telling her more than he meant to, how he was a single dad, how he worked double shifts, how he used to want to open his own restaurant before everything changed. Madelyn listened like no one ever had, and then she told him who she was. CEO of Jameson & Co., the woman whose name was on the building he walked past every day. He sat back in his chair. "Why didn't you say that at the event?" She shrugged. "Didn't want to be treated different. Besides, you didn't care who I was. You just helped." He shook his head, a slow smile forming. "So you're my boss's boss's boss." "Technically, yeah. Should I be nervous?" "Only if you say no to dessert." Over creme brulee and a city sunset, something shifted. Xavier didn't want it to end. But life didn't usually give him room for things like this. Still, when she asked if she could see him again, he said yes. One lunch became 2. Then dinner. Then a walk through Central Park, where he held her hand for the first time while Zayden ran ahead with a balloon. "You're a good dad," she told him. "I try," he said. "Some days I feel like I'm barely keeping us afloat." "You're not alone," she said softly. He looked at her, and for the first time in years he believed it, But nothing stays simple for long. Especially not when the press caught wind of the CEO of Jameson & Co. Seen holding hands with a man who drove a 10-year-old pickup and wore second-hand shoes. And when the headlines hit, everything changed. The photo was on every gossip blog by morning. Madelyn stepping out of a bookstore with Xavier beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. The caption read, "Who's the mystery man with Manhattan's youngest CEO?" In her office, the blinds were drawn low against the morning sun as she scrolled through the headlines. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Board members. PR. Her mother, Charlotte Jameson's voice was sharp the moment she picked up. "You can't be serious." "I didn't do anything wrong," Madelyn said, standing as she walked toward the window. "He's not one of us." Madelyn's grip on the phone tightened. "He's a good man. You want to risk your company over a fling. It's not a fling." There was a pause. "Then make sure it doesn't become a scandal. Your father didn't build Jameson & Co. for you to throw it away over a man who doesn't belong in your world." Madelyn ended the call without replying. In a cramped kitchen across town, Xavier was staring at the same photo on a cracked tablet screen. His neighbor had dropped it off with a grin and a laugh, saying, "You made the news, Romeo." Xaden was busy coloring at the table, humming softly to himself, oblivious. Xavier rubbed the back of his neck, swallowing hard. He hadn't signed up for this. His life didn't have room for cameras or headlines or judgmental stares. He barely had enough space to breathe between work and bills. Still, when his doorbell rang and Madelyn stood there in jeans and a baseball cap, holding a brown paper bag that smelled like cinnamon and coffee, he let her in without a word. "I figured you might not want to go out today," she said. He closed the door behind her. "You think," she set the bag on the counter. "They've already started spinning stories. Half of them aren't true." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "And the other half," she met his eyes. "The part where I like you." "That one's true." His shoulders dropped slightly, the tension in his jaw easing. "You're not worried what people will say. I'm more worried about what you'll say." He pushed off the wall. "I've worked too hard to keep my son's life steady." "I can't be part of some media circus, Madelyn. I'm not asking you to be, but I'm not hiding either." He opened the paper bag, pulling out a still warm croissant. "You didn't have to bring me breakfast. I wanted to." He looked at her quietly. "You want to know the truth," she added. "That photo doesn't scare me, but the thought of not seeing you again does." His throat tightened. "This isn't just about us. Xaden gets teased at school if he doesn't have the right shoes. What happens when someone prints something nasty about me and he has to read it? Then we make sure he knows who you are before the world tries to decide for him." Xavier sat down at the table, watching as she knelt beside Xaden. "Hey, kiddo, I brought the best croissants in the city." "Want one?" Xaden looked up, his eyes curious. "Do they have chocolate?" Madelyn grinned. "Only the good kind." As the boy took the bag eagerly and began rummaging through it, Xavier's walls began to crack. That afternoon, they walked through a quiet street market on the Lower East Side. Madelyn wore sunglasses and a hoodie, not because she was hiding, but because she wanted to be present. They browsed handmade soaps and local honey, and Xavier bought Xaden a tiny potted plant he named Captain Green. When Madelyn tried to pay, Xavier stopped her. "I don't need you to take care of me," he said. "I didn't say you did." "Then what is this?" She paused, brushing her hair behind one ear. "It's me choosing to be here, with you, not because I pity you or want to save you, but because you make me feel more like myself than anyone has in a long time." He looked at her, something unreadable passing through his eyes. "You don't know what it's like to never be enough." "You think I don't," he didn't reply. That evening, Madelyn returned to her penthouse apartment, where her assistant, Nora, waited with a tablet full of damage reports. "The board wants a meeting, tomorrow." "Let them wait," she said, kicking off her shoes. "They won't. They're worried the company's next acquisition will fall through if this story keeps growing." Madelyn rubbed her temple. "I'll handle it." "Do you want me to reach out to a crisis PR firm?" Madelyn looked out the floor to ceiling windows at the glittering skyline. "No. I want the truth to speak louder than any headline." The next day, Xavier was called into a private room at the restaurant by his manager. "There's a man outside. Says he's from the Jameson legal team." Xavier's pulse spiked. He stepped outside to find a man in a sharp navy suit holding a small envelope. "Mr. Madelyn, I've been asked to deliver this to you directly." Xavier opened it. Inside was an invitation, not on paper, but on thick cream cardstock with gold lettering. "Madelyn Jameson requests the pleasure of your company at the Jameson & Co. annual gala." He looked up. "You're kidding." She insisted it be hand-delivered. Xavier stared at the invitation. The gala, the one she once told him was the biggest night of her year. The one where the press, the board, and every investor would be watching, and she was asking him to stand beside her. He glanced back at the note tucked inside, "Come. If we're going to show them what matters, we start here." Xavier looked at the suit the man held out, tailored, midnight black. "No tag, no price. She had it made for you, said you'd argue, but wear it anyway." Xavier let out a breath. He wasn't ready, but maybe it was time to stop waiting for life to give him permission. Maybe it was time to show the world who he really was, the heir outside the Jameson & Co. Headquarters shimmered with camera flashes as sleek black cars rolled up to the curb, spilling out Manhattan's most powerful. The gala was a spectacle of wealth and legacy, one Xavier had only ever seen from a distance, through television screens in diner kitchens or glossy pages of magazines left behind in waiting rooms. But tonight, he walked through the glass doors in a suit that fit like it had always belonged to him. Inside, everything glittered. The walls were draped in cascading silk, the chandeliers above sparkled like constellations, and a full string quartet played something elegant and slow near the champagne fountain. Servers moved with precision, not unlike the way Xavier had once done, their trays heavy with things he still couldn't pronounce. He stood near the entrance, scanning the room. Then he saw her. Madelyn stood at the top of the grand staircase in a deep crimson gown with a high slit and a neckline that commanded attention without begging for it. Her hair was swept back to reveal the delicate curve of her neck, and her expression shifted the moment she spotted him, something between relief and fire. She descended the stairs without breaking eye contact, and when she reached him, she didn't hesitate. She took his hand. "You came," she said, her voice low. "I almost didn't," he replied. "What changed your mind?" "I figured if I was going to be judged," he said, "I might as well look good doing it." She laughed, then leaned in. "You look better than good." Guests had begun to take notice. Conversations paused. Eyes followed them as she led him through the ballroom. Xavier kept his spine straight, head high. He didn't belong here, but he wasn't going to shrink for anyone. They stopped near the front of the room, where a raised dais held a podium and a row of reserved seats. Madelyn gestured to a woman in a navy pantsuit with silver-rimmed glasses. "This is Dana Keller," she said. "She's the lead on our European expansion." Dana extended a hand. "So you're the man the entire city's whispering about." Xavier shook her hand firmly. "I guess I am. Good. It's about time someone reminded this room that character doesn't come with a trust fund." Madelyn raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold statement for someone on the board." Dana shrugged. "I didn't inherit my seat. I built my way here." "I know what that costs." As Dana was pulled away by another executive, Madelyn turned to Xavier. "You okay?" He scanned the crowd. "I've had worse nights." "Then let me make this one better." She guided him onto the dance floor as the music shifted to something slower, more intimate. He hesitated for only a second before placing a hand on her waist. "I haven't danced in years," he murmured. "Then you're overdue." They moved together, not perfectly, but in rhythm, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath against his collar. Close enough that for a moment the rest of the room fell away. "You know they're going to talk," he said quietly. "They already are. And you're bored. Half of them think I'm reckless," she said, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. The other half wish they had the guts to do something real. The music faded. As they stepped off the floor, a voice called out behind them, "Madelyn." Xavier turned to see a tall man approaching, older, with gray at his temples and a tailored tux that screamed generational wealth. He didn't bother hiding the disapproval in his expression. "Peter," she said coolly. "You're making a mistake," he said, eyes flicking to Xavier. "Look around. This isn't a place for charity cases." Xavier's jaw tightened, but Madelyn spoke before he could. "This isn't charity," she said. "This is my life, and I'm choosing who gets to be in it." Peter laughed without humor. And when the stock dips, when investors start pulling out, then I'll rebuild, like my father did. But I won't sell out my own happiness to keep people like you comfortable. Peter looked at Xavier one last time. You'll ruin her. Xavier didn't flinch. No, I'll fight for her. Peter walked away without another word. Madelyn exhaled. Sorry about that. I've heard worse, Xavier said. But I don't like standing still while someone talks about me like I'm not here. She nodded. Next time, I'll let you speak first. Later that night, while guests trickled out and the ballroom emptied, Madelyn led him up a private staircase to a balcony overlooking the city. The wind swept her hair across her cheek, and he reached up to tuck it behind her ear without thinking. This world of yours, he said, it's loud. It is. Some days I don't know if I can keep up. You don't have to, she said. You just have to walk beside me. He looked out over the skyline. You said once that you didn't want to be treated differently, that you wanted to be seen. I remember. I see you, he said. Not the headlines, not the boardroom, you, she stepped closer. And I see you, not the paycheck. Not the past, just the man willing to show up even when everything's stacked against him. He kissed her then, not because the moment demanded it, but because there was no other choice. It wasn't tentative. It was a promise. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I'm not asking you to change, she whispered. I just don't want to do this without you. You won't have to. But not everyone was ready to accept them so easily. The next morning, Xavier opened his apartment door to find an envelope taped to the handle. Inside, a check. More zeros than he'd ever seen in one place, and a note, walk away, before she pays the price. Xavier stared at the check, the ink still crisp, the paper thick and heavy like it had been printed just for intimidation. The amount was staggering, more than he'd make in 5 years, maybe 10. But it wasn't the zeros that made his stomach twist. It was the message. He turned the envelope over again, eyes narrowing. No signature, no name, just the unspoken threat. Leave her or she suffers for choosing you. He didn't tell Madelyn right away. Instead, he spent the next day doing what he always did, taking Xaden to school, working a midday shift at the kitchen, and walking the long way home through the city, hoping the cold air would clear his head. But the silence only made the pressure louder. That night, after Xaden had fallen asleep on the couch with a crayon still in his hand, Xavier pulled the envelope from the drawer where he'd hidden it. He stared at it for a long time before finally slipping it into his coat pocket. The next morning, he asked Nora to arrange a meeting with Madelyn, not at her office, somewhere quiet, somewhere private. She chose the rooftop of her father's old townhouse in the West Village, a place she rarely visited anymore, but still kept for sentimental reasons. When Xavier arrived, she was already there, seated on a bench, wrapped in a long charcoal coat, her breath catching in the cold. He didn't sit, she looked up at him. What's going on? He took a slow breath and pulled the envelope from his coat. This was taped to my door. She opened it and read the note, her face unreadable. I don't know who sent it, he said, but I've got a few guesses. Her hand clenched around the paper. They think they can buy you off. They don't know me, she stood. I can handle this. Xavier stepped forward. That's not the point. I don't want this to be a fight you have to keep having. Then what are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you built. You've spent your whole life proving you belong in those rooms. I don't want to be the excuse they use to lock you out, her eyes flashed. You think I care more about a seat at a mahogany table than I do about you? He didn't answer. She walked toward him, voice low and fierce. I didn't fall for you because you make things easy. I fell for you because you make them real. He finally looked at her. I've always had to fight for stability, for Xaden, for myself. I never imagined I'd have to fight just to stay in love. I'm not asking you to fight. I'm asking you to stay. But what if staying hurts you? She stepped closer and placed her hand over his heart. Then we take the hit together. He swallowed hard, emotion catching in his throat. I didn't ask for you to rescue me, she said. I asked you to walk beside me. And I'm not letting go because someone tried to scare you off. He reached up and cupped her cheek. I'm not scared. Then be with me, fully, no more hesitation. He nodded slowly, forehead resting against hers. Okay. Later that week, a new story broke, not gossip, not scandal. An op-ed penned by Madelyn herself. Published in the biggest business journal in the country, She didn't defend her relationship. She didn't apologize. She told the truth about the man who saved her from a fall, about the boy who named a plant Captain Green, about the life she wanted to build, one not defined by pedigree or perception, but by choice. The article went viral. Some investors grumbled. A few threatened to pull out. But then something extraordinary happened. Dana Keller rallied others on the board, naming Madelyn's leadership as visionary. Clients who had grown tired of curated perfection praised her for humanizing a world built on masks, and the acquisition everyone thought would fall apart, it went through, twice the original offer. The next week, Xavier picked Xaden up from school wearing the same worn jacket he always had. But something felt different. A few parents who used to avoid him nodded. One even smiled. That weekend, Madelyn asked him to meet her at the townhouse again. When he arrived, there were candles flickering in the windows. A small group of people waited inside: Dana, Nora, and a justice of the peace. He blinked. "What's going on?" Madelyn stepped forward in a simple ivory dress, her hair down, eyes bright. "I don't want a ballroom. I don't want 1,000 guests. I just want you tonight, here." Xaden tugged at Xavier's hand, grinning. "She asked me first." Xavier turned to her. "Are you sure?" She smiled. "I've never been so sure of anything." The vows were quiet, simple, honest. Xavier promised to never let the noise of the world drown out the truth between them. Madelyn promised to never let fear dictate love. When they kissed, Xaden clapped so hard he knocked over a candle. Everyone laughed. Later, as they stood wrapped in each other on the rooftop where the city stretched out in every direction, Xavier whispered, "I never thought this life would be mine." Madelyn pressed her lips to his collarbone. "It was always yours. You just had to stop surviving long enough to let it in." He held her tighter. "Then let's live it." And they did, together. Always, the early spring breeze carried the scent of clean rain and blooming magnolias through the open windows of the townhouse. Warm morning light streaked across the hardwood floors as Madelyn padded barefoot into the kitchen, her robe tied loosely around her waist. She found Xavier already there, pouring batter into a skillet, his hair still damp from the shower. Xaden perched on the counter beside him with a whisk in one hand and a comic book in the other. "You're putting blueberries in again," Madelyn noted, sliding into a stool at the island. "Zay said it's the only acceptable version of pancakes now," Xavier replied without turning. Xaden nodded solemnly. "All other pancakes are canceled." Madelyn grinned, resting her chin on her palm. "What would I do without you two?" "Starve," Xavier said, flipping a perfectly golden pancake. "Be boring," Xaden added. The laughter they shared was easy, effortless. A rhythm formed not out of convenience but out of genuine joy. By the time the plates were cleared, and Xaden was dressed for his school weekend field trip, bag packed, water bottle filled, and sneakers double-knotted, Xavier helped him into his jacket. "Remember," he said, crouching to meet his son's eyes, "stay with your group, don't feed snacks to any animals, and if something feels weird, tell Miss Kira and call you. I know, Dad." Xaden gave him a quick hug, then turned to Madelyn. "Are you staying here while I'm gone?" "I will if your dad lets me." Xaden gave a dramatic sigh. "You're married. You don't need permission." With that, he bounded out the door toward the waiting school van, waving until it turned the corner. Xavier leaned against the frame once the door shut. "He's growing too fast." Madelyn wrapped her arms around his waist from behind. "We'll keep up." Later that afternoon, they returned to Madelyn's office for the first time since the gala. She had cleared her calendar, but there were still contracts to sign, and Dana had requested a final review of the Paris expansion plans. Xavier waited in the lounge across from her office, watching the city buzz past the windows while sipping espresso from a cup so small he joked it was made for squirrels. When she returned, she didn't go back to her desk. Instead, she sank onto the couch beside him with a content sigh. "I think I'm finally learning how to breathe again," she said. He brushed a thumb across her knee. "Because the chaos has slowed." "No," she said, "because I'm not facing it alone." He tilted his head. "There's something different about you today." She looked amused. "Other than the paperwork-induced headache?" "No," he said, studying her expression. "You're calmer. Softer, maybe, but not in a fragile way. It's like you're not bracing for impact anymore. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, folded paper. "I've been thinking about something." He opened it. "A design sketch. A restaurant floor plan, elegant but warm. I found a space," she said. "In Tribeca. It's tucked between a bookshop and a florist, high ceilings, natural light. I thought maybe it could be ours." He looked up, stunned. "Ours? I don't want to just support your dream," she said. "I want to build it with you." He stared at the sketch, then at her. "I didn't ask you for this." "I know," she said, "but I listen, and I believe in what you want to create." Emotion tightened his features. "You know what scares me more than failing?" She waited, finally having everything I ever wanted and wondering if I deserve it. She touched his face gently. "You do, you always have. It just took the world too long to catch up." They visited the space that evening. Dust still clung to the windows and the floor needed refinishing, but Xavier saw it instantly. The open kitchen, the community tables, the smell of fresh herbs and roasted garlic. A place filled with stories, not just food. 6 weeks later, the sign went up. Madelyn & Co. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. Word spread quickly anyway. People came for the food, but they stayed for the warmth. Xavier moved through the kitchen like he was born there, while Madelyn handled the business side with the same precision she brought to her company. And sometimes, when Xaden did his homework at the counter while Xavier plated dishes and Madelyn refilled coffee, the regulars whispered that it felt like something rare, a family that wasn't just surviving, but thriving. One evening, as the last table cleared and the lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, Madelyn found Xavier on the rooftop above the restaurant, leaning against the railing, gazing at the skyline. She joined him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The boardroom," he nodded. "Not a bit," he turned to her. "Not even the power. This," she said, gesturing to the city, the soft music drifting from below, "feels more powerful than anything I ever had in that tower." They stood in silence for a moment. "I want more," he said suddenly. She looked up. "More mornings like that one," he said. "More slow dances in the kitchen, more everything." She smiled, leaning into him. "Then let's take it all." They kissed under the stars, the city stretching infinitely around them. Years later, Madelyn & Co. would become a destination restaurant, featured in travel magazines and food blogs alike. Xaden would win a scholarship to a prestigious art school, his comic book sketches filling the walls of the place that started it all. And Madelyn would never once miss the boardroom. Every Sunday they closed the restaurant early. Not for business reasons, but because they had a tradition. Dinner on the rooftop, just the three of them. No phones, no guests, just laughter, food, and a view that reminded them of how far they had come. And as Xavier poured wine into Madelyn's glass one chilly evening, he whispered, "I would have caught you 1,000 times over." She leaned in, eyes shining. "And I would have fallen every time just to land here." They clinked glasses and never looked back.